This book right here completely changed the way that I view content creation on YouTube. Hi there friends, welcome back to the channel where we focus on productivity, self-improvement, and or making the best possible versions of ourselves. So today we're looking at the book Show Your Work by Austin Kleon. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. So yeah, it's gonna be a little confusing that his name is the same as mine, but it'll be totally fine. We got this. Sadly, I don't have time to cover all of the aspects in this book. So what I've decided to do is take one key insight from each chapter. So here are the few of the things that we are going to be covering. One is find a scenious. I'll explain what that is a little bit later. Take people behind the scenes. Turn your flow into stock. Don't be a hoarder. Work doesn't speak for itself. Share your trade secrets. Shut up and listen. Don't feed the trolls. Pay it forward and begin again. Timestamps for all that will be in the description. Chapter 1, find a scenious. Scenious is like a genius, except for it's embedded in the scene instead of in the genes. Brian Eno describes it this way. Scenious stands for intelligence and intuition of a whole cultural scene. In this portion of chapter 1, Austin describes the importance of finding a scenious and debunks the whole theory of the lone genius. He recognizes that ideas are not born out of individuals, but out of a group of creatives with a common mind. He shows us that throughout history, the people that we think were lone geniuses actually had a whole scene of people that were supporting each other, observing each other, copying, stealing each other's work, and contributing. He discusses how scenius doesn't take away from the achievement of those great individuals. They acknowledge that good work is not made in a vacuum, and that creativity is a collaboration of one mind connected to many minds. Being a scenius isn't about how smart you are or how talented you are. It's about what can you contribute. And he leaves us with this question of what conversations do you start? Austin shows how everyone has something to contribute, master and apprentice alike. Chapter 2, take people behind the scenes. In this section of the chapter, Austin describes how and why we should take people behind the scenes, and why it's so important that we get our mindset off of the product and onto the process. He explains how the process is what we actually love, and how by sharing that, we open up a vulnerable part of ourselves and we allow for a very unique bond to create with our viewers, because people love to be a part of the creative process. Like when you show them that, it feels like they're actually a part of your creative process. Chapter 3, turn your flow into stock. So in this portion of the chapter, Austin describes the difference between flow and stock. Basically, with flow is like the day-to-day stuff, your posts, your tweets, whereas the stock is more the slow, long-term, evergreen content, for example. He explains the magic formula of keeping that daily flow of content going out, but yet at the same time collecting little snippets and building a empire to stand on over time. One of the reasons this book is so digestible is because of how straightforward it is. One of the things that really resonated well with me, the question of so what? He's talking about sending out a daily flow of content, but he's saying like, don't just be spewing out this garbage to everybody and just like giving it the shotgun effect. He's like, make sure it's profitable, make sure it's actually going to do some good. Basically, you just take your content, you're like, okay, so what? Like, why is this valuable? And he's like, don't overthink it. And if you're not sure, set it aside for a day and then come back and look at it with fresh eyes. Chapter 4, don't be a hoarder. He starts out by talking about cabinets of curiosities, which in old times were people that would have these rooms just full of all the different things that they collected from all their travel. And he shows how we all have cabinets of curiosities built within our minds based on the experiences that we've had. The book encourages us to share those influences and experiences that we've obtained, because it clues people in to who we are and what we do. He argues that sometimes the influences actually speak louder than your work, because our tastes overshadow the work that we do. He ends with a quote by DJ Spooky, "You're only as good as your record collection." Chapter 5, your work does not speak for itself. This portion really challenged a very deep presupposition of mine. But in this chapter, Austin debunks the theory that your work speaks for itself, because sadly, it just doesn't. The same way a real painting and a counterfeit painting don't carry the same amount of value in your eyes. Telling a bad story with your work, even if your work is good, it's just not going to be as valuable to other people in their eyes. It's about learning the mindset that our work doesn't exist in a vacuum, as many of us wish, And so if our work doesn't speak for itself, we have to speak for it. You're already telling a story with what you share. So if you want to become better at sharing yourself, you need to become a better storyteller. Chapter 6, share your trade secrets. Annie Dillard quotes, "The impulse to keep to yourself what you have learned is not only shameful, it is destructive. Anything you do not give freely and abundantly becomes lost to you. You open your safe and find ashes." In this chapter, Austin teaches us that teaching doesn't mean instant competition. It takes time to master a skill, so don't be afraid to share it. I learned that teaching people about my work doesn't actually subtract from it. In fact, it adds to it. People feel more connected to me and my work, and so they take more interest in it then. In fact, if you share your knowledge with others, you'll end up being educated in return, because you'll attract other people that will come to you and be like, hey, if you read this, or like, here's an article about this that you should read. And in the long run, you'll actually end up learning more than if you hold all that knowledge in. Chapter 7, shut up and listen. Austin has a term called human spam for people that don't want to pay their dues, but they want their piece right then and there. He explains how this can happen over time, where creators become slowly more focused on themselves and what they're doing with their own projects, that they actually don't have time to be invested in anything other than that. He encourages us to interact on the level of our fans, basically having the mindset of, if you want to have fans, you have to first be a fan. If you want to be noticed, you first have to notice. If you want to get, you have to first give. Essentially, just be an open node. Be considerate and don't turn it into human spam, because nobody appreciates someone like that. Chapter 8, don't feed the trolls. Dealing with haters is so much more than just like not listening, because when a troll gets inside of your head, learning how to deal with that is actually really difficult. And we'll all get to that point sometime. So this chapter, he discusses how to deal with that, how to get that voice out of your head, how to discern who the criticism is coming from, what a troll is, and how to deal with that person. Chapter 9, pay it forward. Chapter 9 really covers a lot. He mainly discusses how to monetize your work and how to deal with the negative repercussions that end up coming with that. Because when you begin asking your audience to pull out their wallets, you're inevitably going to get some pretty harsh responses. So he discusses how to take that attention and turn it into something. The book also teaches about how to give back. That's the main push of the chapter, of like how to give others a platform to share their work, and give them an opportunity. Because at some point you're going to get to a certain point in your career where you're not saying yes a lot anymore, and it actually switches and you have to begin saying no. Learning how to deal with that switch when people are constantly grabbing for your attention, and how to give that appropriately. Essentially teaching us how to be generous enough to give to the people that we can, but also selfish enough to get our own work done. And he just tops it all off with this amazing quote. Above all, recognize that if you have had success, you have also had luck. And with luck comes obligation. You owe a debt to the unlucky. Chapter 10, begin again. So last and possibly most important of this whole book, Austin discusses the importance of beginning again. Because at some point in all of our creative careers, we're going to get to a point where we feel like we're not being pushed anymore. We're not actively learning. That is the point where Austin says it is time to begin again. It's not exactly starting over. It's more of a new beginning kind of thing, because you're still going to have all of those old habits and old lessons that are going to seep into your new content. It takes a lot of courage to throw out work and rethink it. But he makes the point that unless we do that, we're not going to have room for anything new. Peter McKinnon is a fantastic example of this, because years ago, like when he was still growing out of his house, essentially, he's talking about like he felt kind of stale and he just wanted to move on and he wanted to go to something bigger and better. Peter pushed through and began again, essentially, and his channel is so much better because of that. And he's had multiple new beginnings like that, where he starts a brand new adventure and like pretty much just starts from scratch, and it's amazing. Austin really challenges us in this book when he says, if you're not embarrassed about where you were a year ago, you're probably not learning enough. And he's like, go back to chapter 1, man, become an amateur again. He's like, look for something new to invest and pour yourself into, and document the process and share it for other people to watch you learn. Finally, he says, don't quit your show. And he makes the point that most people get what they want simply by sticking around long enough. He's like, make sure you don't quit prematurely. He wraps it all up with this just fantastic quote or saying. He says that work is never finished, it is only abandoned. So if any of that at all sounded interesting to you, make sure you buy this book. I mean, we covered like 5 or 10% maybe of what's actually inside of this thing. They're cheap, you can read it in like half an hour. Like you literally can't go wrong. So links down in the description for all that stuff if you want to check it out. Real quick before you head out, I just want to remind you that a video like this usually takes around 10 to 15 hours to write and produce and edit and all that stuff. So if you'd like to help me further my goal of becoming a full-time YouTuber, simply leaving a comment or a like actually goes a really long ways. And with that being said, gentlemen, stay creative, and I'll see you in the next video.